Okay. Today is Sunday, October the 2nd, 2005. Today we're talking to Galen Pittman. So Galen, why don't we start and tell us something about yourself?
Well, we're here at my folks' place, and they've been here since 1942. It's what's left of an old orange grove, and I was born a few miles to the east of here and brought home here from the hospital. So this has pretty much been home all of my life, even though I've lived, you know, in the surrounding communities, surrounding areas. And I went to school here in Glendora, and then I ended up going to college at Cal Poly Pomona to get a degree in ornamental horticulture, because of course I was interested in growing plants. But the program took so long to get into, I finally decided I would go into fine art, and ended up getting my undergraduate degree in fine art. And lo and behold, later in life, now here I am back doing horticulture instead of fine art. I first became interested in epiphyllums because my father grew epiphyllums, and as far as I can recall, he started growing them probably in the late 40s, and bought his plants from the big nurseries of the time. He went to Coolidge Rare Plant Gardens in Pasadena, and also Bean Gardens there, and Cactus Pete in Los Angeles, and had a fairly substantial collection when I was growing up, and I became interested in it, and we then started going, when I was probably a young teenager, to other nurseries like Hearst Nursery, which was then in El Monte, and also Hawks Nursery, which was in El Monte. And we'd go there, you know, several times a week during the blooming season and purchase cuttings and plants, and I got a fairly good collection going in my teens, and my interest in epiphyllums waned a little bit while I was in college, and I'm afraid they languished a bit and lost some of the plants I probably should have concentrated on keeping. But I ended up getting back into epiphyllums again when I started going to the antique swap meet in Pasadena, and buying from a gentleman that was selling them there. And once I had exhausted his supply of varieties, why, he said that I should go back to Hearst Nursery. And actually, I misspoke earlier by saying that we used to go to Hearst Nursery in El Monte. At that time, I think it was in Los Angeles, because it was on Valley Boulevard. But anyway, she had moved to El Monte, and so we went. I went back to her new location in El Monte, and she had seemed like she hardly had changed a bit, and I started buying plants from her then, and I don't know if she took a liking to me or I took a liking to her, whether it was mutual, but I started volunteering at her nursery and ended up volunteering there for about 14 years until she closed the nursery and passed away shortly thereafter. And near the end there, while she was selling off her stock, I made a concerted effort, along with a couple of other friends, Terry Coulter from North Carolina and Chris Welcher that lives in El Monte, collecting the varieties that she had named, because we wanted to safeguard, you know, them and make certain that they were perpetuated and continued to grow. So I probably have one of the most extensive collections of her introductions as anybody does. And a lot of them, of course, are from Alice Buchanan and Ressie Koch and Slim Hathaway. All of those people distributed their varieties through Ethel. And Ethel is responsible for getting me onto the board of directors of the Epiphyllum Society, of the ESA, and though I'd been a member back in the early 70s, and I'd allowed my membership to lapse when I went off to college, I was over at her nursery one day, and she said that she thought that there was a vacancy on the board of directors and called up, I guess, the right people, and she, while I was there, she organized my being put on the board of directors. So, having not been on to an Epiphyllum Society meeting for probably 10 to 15 years, why I was thrust immediately onto the board of directors as the recording secretary. And anyway, they were an extremely nice group of people, and I'd never really been involved with the people of, of the society. I just was sort of a vicarious member that went to the flower shows and bought things at their plant sale. But anyway, that's when I actually started getting active in the society and going to the meetings on a regular basis and helping the society with its various functions. And at that time, I believe the president was Clem Gowert, and shortly thereafter, I believe Peggy Oberg took over the presidency, and I served as her vice president for several years. And then there's a brief period of time that I was off the board, but for about the last 13 years, with the exception of a short period there, I've been on the board of directors. I'm presently just a director on the board. I don't hold any office. I'm one of the curators. I'm co-curator of the Penteco collection with Ed Beardsley, who's former president and present board member. And the Penteco collection is housed at the LA County Arboretum, and is one of the most extensive collections in the world of epiphyllums. It's owned by the ESA, and I'm not always as active there at the Penteco as I'd like to be, because my responsibilities with my aging parents, etc., kind of call me away from the responsibilities of the Penteco. But I am more or less the person that does the makes the cuttings for all of the fundraisers and labels them, and I do some photography of the flowers there. And Ed Beardsley is really, the trooper that's there on a regular basis and takes care of everything and makes certain that everything's watered and fertilized and categorized as it should be.
Okay, why don't you kind of give us some more detail about where your present collections stands?
I started, of course, with my father's collection, and his interest had sort of, diminished, and so I took over his collection. And many of the plants had lost their labels. Of course, that has happened to many of us who haven't properly labeled their plants. There's a plug for labeling your plants properly. As I said, I started collecting from this gentleman at PCC, and then from Ethel Hurst. I also went to all of the Epiphyllum shows and collected, bought cuttings at the plant sales, etc. And I was always looking for something that was rare and out of circulation, because I had an interest in preserving the varieties, and even more so now that I'm co-curator of the Penteco collection, in trying to ensure that some of these older varieties still stay in circulation. At my peak, and I wouldn't say that I'm there at the moment, I had over 2,000 varieties growing here at the Folks Place, and many of those I've either found were incorrectly identified once they bloomed after I'd purchased them, or they really were just too problematic to grow, and the reason that they were obscure is that they, died off for people. And I should also add that in 1992, Harold F. Watts, who was an active member of the ESA, that though no one realized that he was hybridizing, had been hybridizing and had started a lot of seedlings. And when he passed away, his wife called the ESA and asked if we would like to assume responsibility of his plants. And a former board member, Dan Lundy, and I went to Mr. Watt's home with a rental truck, not realizing how extensive the collection was, and there are over 2,000 seedlings growing there. So after several loads of bringing those from Sherman Oaks back here to this place in Glendora, I was the only one that seemed to have the room available to take care of them. That following year, 1993, was the first year that I registered any of the Watt seedlings, and I think the first year I registered about 12, and have registered seedlings from that collection since then. I think there probably are about 140 or 135 Watt seedlings that I've registered. I also now own the Latimer seedlings. Rick Latimer was a hybrid, actually his father was a hybridizer in San Diego area, and when Rick Latimer passed away unexpectedly, his collection was divided between the two large Epiphyllum nurseries there in San Diego, Rainbow Gardens and Gray Davis Nursery, and they subsequently gave them to me. So I now have all, as far as I know, at least the majority of the Latimer seedlings. I still have also some of Alice Buchanan seedlings that I acquired from Ethel Hurst, a few Coke seedlings, and I have seedlings of my own coming along. I started setting seed pods back in the early 90s and wasn't particularly successful at germinating my own seeds, so I gave them to Terry Coulter that lives in North Carolina, and with the humidity and the heat that they have back there and the summer rain, he was able to grow the seedlings very capably. And about a year and a half ago, he made cuttings off of all of those seedlings because he was going to have to rebuild the shade house. And so now I have cuttings of those seedlings. And hopefully this coming year will be the first year that I'll be registering any of my own hybrids. Ask me something else.
So can you think of a flower that you have used as standard for your to use for your hybrids?
Well, there are a lot of really wonderful flowers out there. I mean, you really can't pick a favorite, but Evelyn Shiraki, who's I think the foremost hybridizer at the moment, has used Callisto, I think, very successfully as a parent. And you know, a flower like Callisto is extremely large, large flower, has a large petal count, and has good substance to it, and of course is a good grower. And it seems that we're finding out that the seed parent is more dominant than the pollen parent in most cases. And so choosing something like Callisto as the seed parent gives you that much better seedlings, and you have greater likelihood of getting something that's really worthy of naming. You have seedlings coming along, that you've nurtured and taken care of for years, and you have these large established plants. You feel a compunction to register, all of the plants, and yet many of them either look too similar to one of the parents that they come from, or look too similar to another plant that's already in existence or already registered. So, I mean, those I still can't destroy. I end up giving them to friends that vow that they won't register them or distribute them or put their own name on them.
Where do you draw your inspirations for naming your hybrids?
Well, I guess during the course of the year I keep finding various names that I think are appropriate, and I write them down on any scrap of paper or whatever I have at the moment, and I end up putting them on the computer and having this list, and I have this huge list of all of these wonderful names that never seem to actually match the flower that I need to name at the moment. It's kind of difficult to get just the perfect name for the flower. At the same time, I've named some things that I regret having named. Not the
Like?
flower, not the flower itself. Oh, I'm not going to tell you what they are. That would be sacrilege. But there are a few names I've come up with that were probably a little bit too difficult to pronounce or spell, or maybe like Thais, names like that that are a bit too obscure for most people, or that they mispronounce. Go ahead.
What are some of your favorite flowers that you name, and why are these flowers your favorite?
Well, I wanted to name one for my mother, and I didn't know, I wanted within her lifetime to be able to name something for her, and I would have liked to have named one of my own personal seedlings for her, and yet one of the Watts came along, and it was pretty much her favorite kind of coloration, and it had been a successful cross of Mr. Watts, and many have been named from it. In fact, I named one just this last year from that cross. I think it's probably the last seedling from the cross, but Doris W. Pittman, I think I registered in, maybe 97, 96, 97, and I really like the ruffled, big, lush, heavy blossoms that it has, and a lot of Watts have that kind of heavy substance, and that wide petals. Used Showboat a lot, and Showstopper, and Virginia Strong, and Dolly Madison, and combinations of those flowers with, and of course also with other flowers have produced, in many cases, large, heavy substanced, ruffly things. In fact, Chuck Everson of Rainbow Gardens told me that he could spot a Watt seedling from other hybrids because of those characteristics, that heavy substance, etc.
Let us probably go back to some of the other people that you have known in the past. Who would you say is probably one of the people that you remembered, and why?
Well, certainly Ethelhurst, because I volunteered at her nursery for so long. But other board members that have been there, and past presidents. I also, recollections from childhood, I remember going to Cactus Pete's, both of Cactus Pete's nurseries. And, that was kind of an event during the season. And I was, of course, much smaller, but fascinated by going to this very exotic, lush-looking, kind of almost like an amusement park to me of all of these epiphyllum flowers blooming. And I also remember, of course, going to Beam Gardens. Coolidge Gardens had already closed by the time I came along, but I remember going to Beam Gardens. I remember Mr. Beam and his daughter Shirley, and don't remember ever having met Mrs. Beam, Gertrude Beam, but I certainly remember Ed Jahelski, who is the daughter-in-law of the Beams. And when Beam Gardens was getting ready to go out of business, which I'd heard through the rumor mill, either that or it was, we were all notified that they were going to go out of business. I started going there at the same time I was buying from Ethelhurst when I got back into growing the epiphyllums again, and I went there about once a week, and he would prepare an order for me. I was trying to get a cutting of everything that they still had left in the nursery, thinking that I would safeguard their collection. And the cuttings were very generous. I mean, they were 10 to 12 inches long, and I thought, oh, I'm going to be so smart, I'm going to cut these in half and get twice the amount of growth. Well, it was probably a mistake. If I'd actually left the cuttings full size, I would have had better results. In many instances, the cuttings came from plants that were so old and hadn't been repotted for so long that I lost a lot of the cuttings. But I tried to safeguard, many of those as possible. Back when I was still a teenager, we also went to Hawk's nursery in El Monte, and she was just at that time. Ethelhurst wasn't living on Lambert, but Hawk's nursery was on Lambert, And my dad and I would go there after school, after I got out of school, and we'd see what was blooming, and we'd buy, you know, several varieties every week from her. And she eventually moved her nursery down to Vista, and didn't realize that she'd moved her nursery into an extremely cold part of Vista. And either in her first or second season down there, she lost a substantial number of her plants. And she eventually went out of business. And I think everyone's more or less lost touch with the Hawks. I really don't know if they're still living in the San Diego area or still with us at all, for that matter. I did order plants from Bob Grimshaw and met him several times, though I was never at his home. I never saw his home nursery there. I used to go with Ethelhurst to Ressie Koch's home down in, I guess it would be considered Seal Beach. I really don't know that area that well. I knew how to get there, I just didn't know what town I was in. And he was always very kind and generous, and would offer me cuttings that of things that were blooming at the time. And Ethelhurst, of course, would bring things back. You know, we brought things back for her nursery from Mr. Koch's. Also, the first time I ever met George French, Ethel wanted to go down there to get some varieties from him, and so I took her down to San Diego and met George French, and I didn't realize that you could actually have an audience with the great George French. I thought he was some, you know, hermit that only allowed certain people to come and visit his collection, and turned out that he was, of course, extremely kind and friendly, and for years I have been going down there on a yearly basis and buying new varieties from him, so that I have a fairly extensive collection of George's introductions as well. I've, over a period of years, developed a friendship with Chuck Everson and Jerry Williams that own Rainbow Gardens, and they're still in the epiphyllum business. Of course, they also have a diversified nursery of other cactus and succulents, and I try to see them several times during the year. And also Gray Davis, Jean Gray and Michelle Davis, that own Gray Davis Nursery, and they've recently closed the nursery, but I've been going there for years, and I've provided Rainbow Gardens and Gray Davis Nursery with more varieties that I've named than acquired varieties from them.
Wow. Okay. Well, this is your big time now to go ahead and promote your nursery.
Oh,
what
my
is it
nursery?
called?
Well, Chris Welcher showed up at Hearst Nursery one day and was interested in growing the plants, and he was much younger than I, and he started working for Ethel in return for epiphyllum cuttings, and he rebuilt part of the nursery for her and did weeding and several other things, and I'd see him on occasion when I was down. We were there at the same time, and near the end of her life, we would see each other more often, and he was also buying varieties from her like I was to safeguard that they wouldn't fall into obscurity. And after she passed away, he contacted me and said, you know, maybe we should pool our resources here and make certain that we have the same plants and compare notes on things. And so we actually became better friends. And both his collection and my collection got so out of hand that we decided that we'd maybe sell cuttings to sort of pay for our addiction to the plants. So about 3 years ago, we started selling at the Green Scene, which is a fundraiser for the Fullerton Arboretum in Orange County. And we've sold there either at both of their events during the year or especially in the springtime ever since. And we now have about between 6,000 and 7,000 cuttings that we start per season, per year, to sell at that event, and also on eBay. He's been selling on eBay, and the nursery's appointment is by appointment only, and the nursery per se is at his home in El Monte, and I'm sort of the growing ground here. I sort of am do the behind the scenes, some of the propagation, and mostly I'm the one that does growing the stock plants that provide the cuttings for them, for us.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to share with us that we haven't covered so that people may know?
Well, one thing is not to be afraid of becoming a board member or going onto the board of directors of the ESA. It's a very fine group of people. Many of them are retired professional people of many different walks of life, and the board of directors kind of ensure that the ESA continues to move ahead. It used to be that we would have to scramble every season to make enough money at our fundraisers to maintain the society and its publication, the bulletin. But within the last year, there was a large bequeathment from a former member, which has more or less ensured that the ESA is going to continue for a very long time. But you know, as people age or as interests wax and wane, why there are vacancies on the board of directors, and I've had a great time working with those people. They've just been a lot of fun. There are of course we work together at the various fundraisers and events and the show, but we also see each other socially, you know, beyond the Epiphyllum Society, and they've turned out to be really fine friends.
Well, we will now be showing you Galen's nursery. So at this time,
off season with no flowers.
Right. So, but anyway, so we take this time for the 65th anniversary committee to thank him for taking his time and sharing about his life, his views, and other things that people ought to know between now and 10 years from now, and hopefully that people will know something a little bit more about one of our members. And again, thank you, Galen.
My pleasure. Come back and see me again in another 5-10 years. You know, he's